Hold on.
All right. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this League of Women Voters Corpus Christi area membership meeting. We are delighted that you are here and are able to join us. Just a reminder, as always, is that we are a nonpartisan grassroots civic organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. I'm delighted that all of you have had the opportunity or have taken the opportunity to join us this evening. I do want you to know that you are muted. You are still participating. You are still here to join us. When you have questions, if you would please put them in the chat, not the Q&A, that would be most helpful to us. For right now, as we go along, at the very end of the program, there will be an opportunity for your questions to be addressed either by us or by Dr. Huerta. And so please remember to go ahead and put those in the chat. So welcome again. I'm glad you're here. Remember that at the end of this presentation at 6:30, we will have a very short membership meeting. And so please stay with us for that. There are several announcements that we're making about projects that we're working on. And so it would be helpful to us and to you to stick around for that as well. So at this time, I do want to introduce Julie Rogers, who is our Vice President for Program Advocacy, Study and Advocacy. And so she is here tonight to, as part of her role in that capacity and what happens in that role and what she is charged with doing. So Julie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm so excited that we're having this presentation. Part of my role is to advocate using our local position statements, and our position statement on how we elect our city officials our method of election is under review. So we've invited Dr. Juan Carlos Huerta to join us tonight. And he is going to educate us so we can make some decisions. Dr. Huerta is a professor of political science at Texas A&M University Corpus Christi. He joined the faculty in 1995 and led the university's nationally recognized first-year Learning Communities program from 2003 to 2016. He regularly teaches state and local politics, public opinion, Latino politics, and undergraduate political science research methods class. Huerta is a co-author of the textbook, Practicing Texas Politics. His recent political science research, which was published in the Social Science Quarterly, examines party identification in Texas, investigating the role of political generations and race and ethnicity in party change. He has also published his research on learning communities and political science teaching and learning in academic journals. Dr. Huerta is active in promoting teaching and learning in political science. His leadership roles include Vice President of the American Political Science Association from 2021 to 2022, and President of the Political Science Education Section 2009 to 2011. He was awarded the 2021 Distinguished Service Award by the Political Science Education Section of the American Political Science Association, also known as APSA. His leadership in political science also includes serving on the APSA Council from 2013 to 2014 and is president of the Southwestern Political Science Association 2014 to 2015. Huerta's degrees are in political science with a BA from Texas A&M University and an MA and PhD from the University of Houston. So we are really looking forward to being educated tonight. We base our decisions on facts, and we know you're going to help us reach some good decisions. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, boy, it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm looking forward to this presentation. Before I get into my comments, I do want to give a shout out to this organization. During the redistricting process, when the Corpus Christi went through, following the 2020 census, I thought that the work the league did on working with our city leaders to engage the community, to have those public forums, to seek the input, was really amazing. And redistricting can be so contentious, and I think the way that the league did it, it was one that really was about dialogue and evidence and seeking to understand. I was really impressed, observing what was going on. And when I make some comments recently for I was doing some consulting for some middle school textbooks, and they were looking for examples for the teacher's manual, and they were looking for some examples of community engagement making a difference. And you're the example I gave, because I thought, wow, they navigated a really tough area. So kudos to the league for the good work that you all do. All right, so I'm going to, I haven't done this in a while. We were doing so much on Zoom, and now we're not anymore at the university, so I might be a little rusty, but I think I shared my screen. You tell me if it looks right, because I can't, from my angle, it looks different. So let's see. Oh, but I think I need to do this show, right? Oh, darn it. Now I'm trying to remember.
It's good, except for, yeah, Anel might be able to chime in. She teaches us consistently. It's good.
There we
you
go.
can just see the slides on the side.
Yeah, now I fixed it, right? Okay. So anyway, so you've already heard this. So I'm going to talk about a single member. I talk fast, and so I'm going to try to slow down when I'm speaking. But I'll be discussing our single member district system today, at large system, not just ours, but what those are in general and how they work. Some reasons for and against them, these things. So I'll just go to the next slides. I think I talk about all that. So, we'll look at some of those factors. And it's going to start off with a conversation. We'll start off talking about representation, because that's really at the heart of what we're dealing with here. Who has a voice in government, and how do we select these people to represent us, and who doesn't have a voice? And we're going to see our nation has a long history of excluding people from representation. Two common systems that we see in municipal elections, including in Texas, the single member district and the at-large system. We'll spend a little time talking about implications for governance, because sometimes I hear people say, well, one system helps with this or does that, blah, 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 blah. So we'll talk about that. We'll have a little bit, I'm not a lawyer, so don't ask me legal questions, okay? We will talk about some legal challenges to the at-large systems that we've seen across the nation. And we'll have some talk about implications of the Voting Rights Act as we go forward. And we'll, of course, talk about the current system we have in Corpus Christi and some unique features of that and what we're doing here locally. All right, so when it comes to representation, and this can be at the state level, federal level, whatever, local levels, people have said, we need fair representation. We need fair representation. And I said, okay, well, that's really good. Yeah, we do need fair representation. But what is fair representation? And that can be a tricky thing to look at. Sometimes, in partisan elections, and we're not dealing with that locally, but in partisan elections, some of the time, well, we need to have all the elections being competitive. Well, but what if one party really does represent more people in the state? Are we going to actually try to make every election competitive? And if all the elections are competitive, like real close to 50-50, you might get it where the small wave election, one party sweeps all elections with just a small advantage in the vote. Are there going to be certain communities you're going to exclude if you don't design districts that are meant to elect folks from those communities? So we really got to have a long conversation. We need to think about what is fair representation. What are we looking for? How do we want to do this? And you may recall during the recent ones we had here in Corpus Christi, there were real conversations about, well, what are the communities in town? What constitutes a community? Which areas should be together so they can elect someone to represent them? So political scientists, we discuss representation in a lot of different ways. Fundamental to it is also this notion of descriptive representation and substantive representation. So descriptive representation, that's the idea, does a representative look like us? Does it represent us? And so one place you may want to look at that, how is representation for men and women in a legislature or a city council? Is it close to being even? I haven't looked at the data, but my suspicion is that women, those who identify as female, are a majority of the Corpus Christi population. That's not true of our city council. And so you would state that from a descriptive standpoint, women are underrepresented on our city council. Okay, so that's one way to look at representation. Do the representatives look like us? And then we looked at age. Well, certainly, it's skewed toward older folks on council, and young adults don't have much in the way of representation on councils or city, state legislatures, any place for that matter. And then there's what's called substantive representation. And the idea behind this is the representative may not look like you, but do they really work to represent a community? And so can an older person be a strong advocate for young adults and represent young adult interest? That would be an example of substantive representation. So then the question comes up, and there's an assumption here. Well, if we have an increase in descriptive representation for a group, then that should lead to an increase in substantive representation. And this has been something political scientists have spent a lot of time studying. I've done some research on this on my own as well. And it turns out descriptive does make a difference. It's not necessarily the biggest predictor of representation, but we do see that when legislatures have, or city councils have more women in it, you do see an increase in attention paid to issues that are of concern to women. When we see councils that have or any representative body for Black Texans or Black Americans, Latinos, Asian American, we also do see an increase in representation. So we got to keep these things in mind when we're talking about how do we represent ourselves. So what is fair, and this notion of descriptive and substantive representation. And then we talk about representation, we can't ignore the fact that for most of our nation's history, we've excluded people from participation and hence representation in our system. I tell my students that you could argue it wasn't until 1965 the United States became a democracy when the Voting Rights Act was passed. Because before then, there were major exclusions of who could participate in our political system. So we do need to be mindful of that. And the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the subsequent amendments and updates to it took steps to increase who could participate in politics, and then also address issues of representation. Because with updates to the Voting Rights Act, there was a recognition, well, you can give people the right to vote, but what if they can't elect people to represent their communities? You have representation then. So in subsequent amendments to the Voting Rights Act, there really was an effort to try to make sure that governments, when they're making districts and coming up with systems for representation, weren't saying, okay, yeah, you can vote all you want, you just can't elect anybody you want, okay? Because that gets representation. And the Voting Rights Act, as it was amended, began to address that. And that's going to tie into a lot of our conversation when it comes to single member district systems and with at-large systems. All right, so now to get to these two popular systems, the single member district and the at-large system. So I imagine most folks in the league are familiar with these. The idea is with a single member district system, you have a city. Well, I'm gonna stick with cities for this example. So we have a city and we divide it up into geographic districts to represent certain communities. And you must live in that district, and only people living in that district can vote for that representative. And one person does wind up representing this district. In some communities, in some states, it can be whoever gets the most votes wins. Here in our community and in many areas of Texas, I can't say it's for everybody, but the idea is you have to have a majority. So you recall we had runoffs in December in Corpus Christi because our single member district systems require a majority. If it was a state position or a county position, a plurality. So plurality is getting the most votes, but that's not necessarily a majority. So that's single member district. And the reason people argue in favor of these is, they do provide representation for specific communities. And I think if I give I'll talk about that large, and it might be easier to see the advantages and disadvantages of the two systems. So again, single member district, You can break it up into different regions or geographic districts. One person represents it. The idea is to look out for that community. At-large systems. With at-large systems, the idea here is that the entire city votes for this representative. Now, in many cities, and not most, the most mayors are elected this way. So the entire city votes for mayor. So their mayors are elected at large. There also can be city council positions elected at large. And so the idea here is that everyone, you have 4 or 5, maybe not 4 be kind of small, but let's say you have 5, 8, 9, whatever city council members. If you're wondering, city council sizes vary across the state of Texas amongst the cities. That you elect a certain number of council members, and the entire city votes for them. So you get your ballot and you go and vote for all these folks. Now, in some cities, they have what are called place systems. And what that means is, let's say there's 9 positions, you announce which one you're going to run for. I'm going to run for place number 1 or place number 2, place number 5, whatever it is. And other candidates file also, and you run against those candidates and can win that. Whoever gets the most votes or majority wins that council place. It's an at-large system, but it's a place. You won a specific seat. Corpus Christi doesn't do that. In Corpus Christi, and I'm not sure that any other cities do this in Texas. In Corpus Christi, the way it works is we have at large, we have 3 at-large positions for council. The mayor's elected at large too. And they all run together, and the top 3 win. And we're going to see in a little bit how that has some interesting implications for the electoral system in Corpus Christi and implications for representation. Houston uses a place system, and they're having, there's actually a legal challenge right now arguing that it's discriminatory. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So, single member district and at large. So, a reason to have a single member district, as I mentioned earlier, is it provides representation for communities. Maybe it's racial ethnic communities, maybe it's certain neighborhoods, maybe there's a part of town that's an older part of town, has different infrastructure needs than a newer part of town. That might, they might want to have their own representation. Maybe we want to have downtown all together in one district, so they have a voice and they have a member of council to represent them. You could also have the downtown, for example, divided up into a bunch of different districts. But perhaps then you wouldn't have representation for the downtown area. Sometimes people argue against this because they say what can happen is, well, that they look out for the communities, but they're not going to see the big picture. They're not going to look for the whole citywide. They're not going to citywide view because they want to get reelected, and they're going to do whatever it takes to represent their district, and they might not care what's happening in another district, or they might not care about the big picture for the city because that's not their concern. They're elected to represent a district. And so that's why some people say at large is better. Well, if we elect at large and they all have a citywide perspective, they'll see the big picture and they'll advocate for the whole city. However, they also may ignore certain communities. It may be a certain top part of there may be a majority of the population in the city that has a certain political viewpoint, and they can wind up electing all the city council members. And there may be other communities that still need a voice, but don't have enough to win citywide. And so, so you can see, I tell my students all the time, there's no perfect way to do anything in politics. It's all trade-offs in what we're choosing and what we want to look at with that. So, and I'll talk about some of the legal challenges and how the Voting Rights Act comes into play with these systems and implications representation in a moment. Sometimes when I talk to folks, they tell me, yeah, well, if you have all single member districts, though, it's harder to govern because they're all looking out for their own district. If you got at large, there's more of a perhaps, not saying it is, these are arguments, right? It's a more homogenous group, and maybe it's easier to govern in a situation like that. Then I tell people too, well, what's more important to you? Do you want to have representation and have more voices? Or do you want to have it where our main concern is getting things done, but perhaps ignoring a lot of voices in a community and not paying attention to different arguments? So those are some of the arguments for singular districts and some things people criticize with them, and then you have at large. Okay, so what wound up happening with this, and the Voting Rights Act is passed, right, 65. And I mentioned to you that in subsequent amendments to the Voting Rights Act, there were efforts to make sure people could elect, people could elect the candidate of their choice. And what I mean by that is what happened with some cities and some communities is, let's say they had district systems, and now they realize, oh, with this new voting rights law, these other communities, particularly maybe Black and Latino communities, now they can elect representatives to represent their communities. Well, you know what? Let's switch to at-large systems instead. So then we can still have, we'll comply to the Voting Rights Act, everybody can vote, but another majority is going to win, and we can exclude folks from representation. And so as the Voting Rights Act was amended, there were legal challenges and interpretations to it. They were saying, you can't design an electoral system in a way that's going to prevent communities that are protected under the Voting Rights Act from electing candidates of their choice. And a good example of this is San Antonio. San Antonio is it's a big city not very far from us. Has a long, Mexican American culture is a big part of the city, a big part of the history of San Antonio, a big part of the population of San Antonio. Yet for decades, Mexican Americans were not winning council seats because it was an at-large system. So it's very difficult to win. And then the type of person who can win at large, they may not really be an advocate for certain communities. They'll have a different, take on politics. And so San Antonio in the late 1970s wound up losing a court case, a federal court case in the Voting Rights Act. And that's what led to San Antonio going from at large to all single member districts. And that's what San Antonio still has to this day. They have all single member districts. And it's had a big difference on the representation on the city council in San Antonio. I mentioned Houston earlier. Houston has a mix. It's a mixed system. They have some single member districts, and they have at large. But again, their at large is a place system. And in Houston, Latinos, Hispanics are the plurality of the population. So the biggest group in the city are Latinos, Hispanics. Yet very underrepresented on city council, in particular when it comes to winning these at-large districts. So that's why there's a challenge right now to Houston's system, saying that it's a system that works against representation. And so we'll see how that goes. With the current courts and the rulings on the Voting Rights Act, I'm not so sure how it's going to play out. Nonetheless, we've got that. As I was talking too, I remember Pasadena, just outside of Houston, has seen a lot of demographic changes going on. And the Latino population is growing in Pasadena. And the Latino population was poised to win a majority of the council seats. So the Pasadena City Council tried to, they did that. Well, they changed the electoral system. They added an at-large seat and got rid of a district seat in an effort to stop the Latino population from winning a majority on council. They actually lost a voting rights case on this and are actually under, they were ordered to go back and are under, I forget the word, but they lost and they're under some kind of supervision from the Voting Rights Act right now. So, so again, this very real issue, and how do we address these things? All right. So what's going on in Corpus Christi then? So Corpus Christi, and actually some of you may remember the political scientist at A&M Corpus Christi, Bob Bezdek, Dr. Bob Bezdek. He was an institution, and he did so much research on Corpus Christi politics. I don't think anyone can ever replace what he did. He would collect data and make these graphs and charts and stuff. And I learned so much from him about local politics in Corpus Christi. He retired. Gosh, it's been a while now. He's retired. But our first article, the first peer-reviewed article I ever wrote, was with him and another colleague who's retired. Gosh, I'm like the old timer around here now. So my colleagues that I wrote with were all retired. Dr. David Below. We wrote an article some time ago. Basically, it was published in 2000, and it was called "Latinos, At-Large Elections, and Political Change," and because we were looking at the Corpus Christi system. So Corpus Christi had an at-large system for electing city council members, the city councils, and Latinos, mostly Mexican Americans here in Corpus Christi, were not winning the at-large elections. And so after the 1981 election, there was a lawsuit, a federal lawsuit, challenging the system in Corpus Christi, arguing that it was a violation of the Voting Rights Act because it served to lead to underrepresentation for the Mexican American Latino population. And so in 1983, there was a consent decree with LULAC, and that was what led to our current 5-3-1 system. So 5 single-member districts, 3 at large, but not place system. Remember, 3 at large, where the top 3 vote getters win. Everybody runs together, the top 3 vote getters win, and a mayor elected at large. So yeah, I have a note there about the top 3. And actually, that's that really does have some big implications here for the representation for us. So this new system goes into place, and then, but the Mexican American Latino population continued to not win the at-large elections. And you can look at Corpus Christi, and then you can say, well, how come a city that's 60% Latino, Mexican American, how come they're not a majority of the electorate? There's a lot of reasons. I can't go. That's beyond the scope of this presentation. But one, you got to consider it's a younger population, and so a good part of the population is ineligible to vote because not old enough. And then we also know that younger voters are less likely to vote. So it's a life cycle effect. The older one gets, the more likely they are to vote. So those are a couple reasons why the electorate. So the population might be 60% Latino, Hispanic, and Corpus Christi, Mexican American, but not the electorate. The people who vote, that's different. So the system went in place in A3, again, but no Latinos, Mexican Americans are winning at-large systems. So the challenge after the 91 election, but in this case, the challenge was unsuccessful, and the 5-3-1 system stayed. So, and I remember Dr. Besek would get involved in all these column, letters to the editor and opinion pieces. And this is back in the Caller Times had an editorial board, and there'd be editorials going back and forth about the system is discriminatory or not. And he and I are pretty convinced, this is a system that was just working against Latino representation, the at-large system. And then, lo and behold, in 1997, Alex Garcia and Arnold Gonzalez win at-large seats. First time it happened under this system. And so everyone's saying, well, see, Besek, you were wrong. People don't vote based on race and ethnicity. It's not an issue anymore. Well, I'll talk about why that's not. I'll get to that in a moment. And since that election, at least one Latino, probably all Mexican Americans, I've never double checked to see if they're all Mexican American, but at least one Latino was won an at-large seat until the fall 2022 election. All right. So that did not happen in 2022. So does the current system provide fair representation? All right. So one thing that happens in nonpartisan elections, like what we have in Corpus Christi, is that you've how can I put this? Party can be a really good cue for how to vote. Okay. So if I know someone's a Democrat or someone's a Republican, it's a shortcut. And it can help me make a vote decision, who I'm going to vote for. It's the best thing we've got in politics. If we know someone's party, it's a good predictor. Well, you don't have that in nonpartisan elections, like for city council races in Corpus Christi. And so voters then use something else to make their vote choices. And, I know I'm talking to a group here of folks who put a voter's guide out and say, well, we provide information. You all are part of the political elite. And I don't mean you go to fancy fundraisers and wear tuxedos and gowns and that kind of stuff. What I mean by political elite is when we say political elite in political science, we mean you're some of the more engaged people there are in politics. All right. So you all know, okay, we know the issues, but a lot of voters don't do that. All right. And they go to the voting booth. They might know who to vote for mayor, but then they see council positions. I don't know who these people are. So they start looking for things that are familiar to them. Oh yeah, that name sounds familiar. And another thing they'll do is, it's not unique to Corpus. They'll look at race and ethnicity as a cue. Okay. Is that a Spanish, Hispanic, Mexican sounding name? I'll vote for this person. Is this a white sounding name? I'll vote for this person. And so that's a reality. Okay. I tell my students all the time, sometimes, I'll tell you these things that we have evidence for. I'm not saying it because, I want to be true or because it shouldn't be true, but it just is. And we have to acknowledge that. So did 97 was that a sea change? Did people stop voting based on race and ethnicity? And the work we did and started looking at the election found something that was different. We said, no, people are still voting a lot of times based on race and ethnicity, but there were some unique things that happened in 1997. So I hope y'all can see this. This is a different era before we had all the fancy, election result posting. But here's the results from the 1997 general election. Back when we had them in the spring, some of you might remember that. And I'd forgotten that Neil and Garrett went to a runoff. But when you look here at I don't know if you can see in fact, you probably can't, I don't know if you can see my mouse as I'm moving it here. But here's the at-large. This is what I'm looking for. Watson, DiCarlo, Jones, Gonzalez, there's one Latino or Spanish surname, Kinnison, Winters, Garcia, there's two Spanish surnames, Martin and Best. Okay. And Garcia and Gonzalez, here they are basically splitting about 29% of the vote each. Martin got, he's here with 19. He's an incumbent, fairly well known at the time, but you had a lot of non-Latino candidates running. And what we found was happening is the reason a major reason Garcia and Gonzalez won is there were just two of them running. And there were a lot of non-Latino candidates running. And so the two Latino candidates split 30% of the vote, or 29% of the vote. And then the non-Latino candidates split the other 70. So there were a lot of non-Latino candidates running against two Latino candidates. That's how that facilitated Gonzalez and Garcia winning. What happens in the next election? Another Latino runs and Alex Garcia loses the election. And so we found it was a case where for most of the candidates, it was almost like a ratio. If there were more non-Latino candidates running and not many Latino candidates, then one of the Latino candidates had a better chance of winning. Now, one exception, when Nelda Martinez ran, the first time for at-large, boy, she got support from the whole community. So we were stunned when we saw that. That had been pretty unprecedented, the kind of broad support she was getting. But that's what we're seeing. Now, let's jump to the most recent one, 2022. Okay, in this election, we have three candidates with non-Spanish surnames, Klein, Pusley, and Hunter. And then all the other candidates, Cervantes, Vera, Martinez, Caballero, and Garcia, Spanish surname candidates. Nancy Vera, I think she did the best amongst the Latino candidates, and with 13%, or almost 13%, but not enough to win the election. So this is the overall results. But see what you got here is remember in 97, you had a very favorable ratio for Latino candidates. In 2022, it's a very unfavorable ratio. So let's look at some communities. How well do you think? Well, that's overall how different communities play out. Here's Central Corpus Christi, Precinct 2. This is my precinct. And you see the same pattern here. You got Klein, Pusley, and Hunter winning. And here's Veta. And this is usually a pretty competitive district, but this is Central Corpus. Let's go out to the island now. And you see that Hunter and Pusley were the big winners out there. And then Jim Klein does come in third, even on the island. Okay. Now this is this is near Moody High School, and you see, now you got, you still have Hunter doing well, but Pusley's not doing as good here now, and now you start seeing some other candidates. Now you start seeing Latino candidates doing a bit better, right? But this is a more Latino precinct. And now let's go up to Cal Allen and look out there in Cal Allen, and those are Leslie's home district, but you see a different pattern here, right? And you got that going across. The Latino candidates are doing pretty poorly out in that part of the city. So the ideas about representation, okay? And there's so many angles we can look at here. But one thing I do want to bring up, that should be the 1983, following the 83 election exists today. That's not the 80, so the 80, yeah, the lawsuit following 83. So sorry about that, I got a typo. That's not the right one. But the fundamental issues that were identified in that lawsuit are still with us. And when we look at representation on the Corpus Christi City Council at large in particular, that ratio of Latino to non-Latino candidates is federal for Latinos, then Latinos can win at large. But as you saw in 2022, it was not a favorable ratio. And that created a situation where it was very difficult for one Latino candidates to win. In fact, none won. I've heard some people tell me, well, we need a place system for at large. I would argue to you that a place system would lead to it would likely cause a more difficult environment for electing Latino or Mexican American candidates at large if you went to a place system. That's what Houston has, and they're being challenged by that. The system we have in Corpus Christi, well, it's I can tell you things about it. It's just it in the right circumstances, Latinos can get elected. But it's fundamentally, it's an at-large system. And those, the literature in political science is clear, at-large systems lead to less representation for Latino community. Well, I mean, some cities it won't make a difference, but in cities like ours, it does lead to underrepresentation. So what about all single member districts? Many Texas cities have gone to all single member districts in a way to improve representation. And it can improve representation beyond racial ethnic identity too, right? I mean, that's one dimension we can look at. But having all single member districts allows for representation of different communities. I think about what used to be District 4 in Corpus Christi, and how I'm at my office right now on the island on campus, but this was part of District. That's when I said the island. I really thought, it's funny. Here, when we say the island, we mean the university, but I know most Corpus Christians think the island means Padre Island. But here at the university, in Ward Island, I'll be specific, this was part of District 4. But was this campus really part of the Flower Bluff Padre Island community, or did it have more in common with Central Corpus Christi? And I know that was an issue that came up during the redistricting, and the council did vote to put the university is now in Council District 2. And so, if you have more districts, you can also, if you had 8 council members representing districts, you could provide even more representation for different communities. Now, so what are some options? Maybe you want to have at-large systems. Sometimes they'll say, it's really good. You do need that big perspective. One thing you can consider too are, again, I'm not a lawyer, but it's my understanding school districts can do this, but not cities at this point. But school districts, and some in Texas do this, they have something called cumulative voting. So, for example, let's imagine we had cumulative voting for our at-large system here in Corpus Christi. So right now we get 3 votes, all right? You can vote for up to 3 candidates for at-large. In cumulative voting, what you can do is you can give all 3 of your votes to your most preferred candidate. So if you want to give one candidate all 3 of your votes, you could. If you want to spread them out amongst 3 candidates, you can. You can give one candidate 2 votes, another candidate 1 vote. But this is a system that some communities have adopted, some school districts have adopted to improve representation. I think it was mostly for Latino communities to elect people at large using the cumulative voting system. I know one thing that happens in Corpus Christi when you vote at large, people vote strategically. They'll identify their most preferred at-large candidate, and they vote for that candidate, and they don't use their other 2 votes. Because in a sense, when you're using all 3 of your votes, you're also voting against your candidate. So if you've got one candidate your favorites, strategically, the thing to do is just vote for your favorite candidate and don't cast your other 2 votes. because you might be voting, you're in a sense, you're also voting against your favorite candidate there. So, I was thinking about this talk, you're considering your position here on what to do, and it's about representation. My take on things, and it's as a value, we have to, a lot of times political science research, we try to, we want to step back and not really put our own values into it, and what we're doing. But, for me, I value representation personally, and I think that's very important in the decision-making process, the deliberative process for government, and that we do want to get a lot of voices in there to talk and have a dialogue, and we can hear from communities. Maybe that leads to tougher governing, and it might be harder for, like a city manager to manage, and the city council to come to some kind of agreement. But that gives everyone a voice and for the representation. And I was looking at your old issue position too, and for whatever it's worth, I think 2-year terms are very short. I know sometimes there's council members or people in elected office, I'm glad they have a 2-year term because they're going to be gone soon. But in the reality of it is, 2 years is a very short time. The first year you're figuring out what's going on, and then it's time for run office again. So there's something to be said for longer terms, 4-year terms instead of 2-year terms. If you have 4-year terms, you could stagger the terms too. So some council members have a little more experience and know what's going on, and a new group will come on. But so there's something to be said for having staggered terms and 4-year terms. Let's see, what else? There's something I was going to tell you about that. Oh, I was thinking about too, is like for a lot of things too, being an effective politician and knowing how to govern takes time. I got some work done on my daughter's car recently, and I wasn't going to go scout out the least experienced mechanic to do what was a pretty complicated repair. I wanted somebody who knew what they were doing and would have done some of this work. And but it's interesting with politics, some people think, no, I want the least experienced person to be making these big decisions. Well, there's something to be said for having people who do have some experience. And that, it's not on the agenda. I'm going to bring up term limits. I know term limits are very popular when it comes to local government elections, but political scientists don't agree on a lot. One thing we do agree on is that term limits, there's really no advantage to having term limits. Sometimes people want term limits. They think, well, we need more, we need to get fresh people on there. We don't want people staying forever in councils. And political science, well, you already have term limits because you can vote them out, right? And if you look at the Corpus Christi City Council, very few council members have termed out. A few have, but not many have. And we've seen incumbents, mayors and other positions lose, when it comes to re-election efforts. So we already have that power to do so. So some people say, oh, we want to have, more turnover. We need term limits. Well, you already have a lot of turnover. You don't need term limits to achieve that. And then if your goal is better governance, well, we'll have better laws passed. There's no evidence that happens either. In fact, there's some evidence that suggests that having term limits produces worse outcomes because you have less experienced politicians in there, and they have a very short time frame, and they're trying to get in there and out real quick. And so they may not take the time to really deliberate, come up with good decisions. Looking at all this, I want to provide an overview about representation. So, the main thing to think about is, and as you are thinking about your position, what is fair representation? When the league thinks about a statement, well, what do you consider fair? What are the goals of having fair representation for the city? And then once you think about what fair representation is, well, then how best do we achieve it? Is it through a single member district? Do we want to keep it at large? But this is what the evidence tells us in my business. And I'm going to pause there because I prefer taking questions instead of talking for 37 minutes. So I'm going to exit out of this. If I can remember how to do it, stop share. Yeah. And I'll just answer any questions you'll have. I love answering questions.
Okay. And we have a couple for you. And I will apologize to the membership at large that we told them to put their questions in chat, and they were unable to do so. So we do have Julie Rogers was able to put one in chat since she was a panelist, and Sally Ferris has one for you from the Q&A.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is, as you answer these questions, I'm going to start allowing everybody into the conversation so that they
Okay.
can use chat as well.
Okay. So you want me
So
to go? You want me to then just open the chat and read the question and answer the questions?
I'll do that.
Oh,
If I can get them
okay.
back up here. Julie?
Yeah.
Julie had a question. Why don't you go ahead and start with your question, and then I'll do the two that are in Q&A as I let people in. Okay.
Okay, because the other one's kind of muddled. It's breaking up. But my first question has to do with, I got the committee report. We recently had a city charter committee, and they reviewed the city charter and recommended that we go to single member districts and with staggered terms. And one of the pros they had said, and so it's got me thinking a lot, was that the cost of running elections would be a pro for moving to single member districts. And so you mentioned about, thinking of different angles and different ways to think about the pros and cons. And so I just wondered if you think that that is a pro, that the cost of running elections is another angle, because they say that if we had all single member districts, it would create less costly elections, and that would broaden the pool and
Okay.
diversity of candidates that could run for
Yeah.
council office.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I see how much, when you look at the donations, it takes a lot more to run for at large than it does for single members. So I just wonder what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I was funny. You were saying first of the question. I thought you meant cost in the sense of how much you pay for elections. I'm like, no, I mean we need to just pay what it takes to run an election. I'm like, you mean the campaign cost? Yeah, I had let me think. Yeah, it does cost more to run at large. Definitely, you need more donations. You need a bigger operation. You need to have a broader campaign. And so, yeah, I think you could, it may be possible to make an argument that if we have district elections, folks in block walk easier, they can get to know their community, their neighbors, there's people in there. And so it may be able to attract a broader pool and not just the folks who have access to big donors. Yeah, I think you can make an argument for that.
Okay. The second question is from Sally Ferris. And I am trying to promote people to panelists so that they have access to the chat, and I'm not having much luck. So go ahead and put them in Q&A. Sorry, that's the best I can do. How does the expense of running at large affect Latino candidates? Does it cost more to run at large than within a single district? Is that the same question you just answered?
Yeah, I think that is.
Okay.
Yeah, it does cost. There's no question it costs more to run at large.
Okay.
You've got to have an entire operation. But the thing is about our at large system that's so interesting about it is it's a top three system. When you're running at large here, you even though it's not a district election, you still got to kind of target your base. You got to kind of figure out, where can I get, the 13 whatever percent it's going to take to be one of the top three candidates, and it might not be 13, it could be higher, but you got to decide, say, look, I'm gonna get blown away in this part of town, but if I put my resources here, I might be able to win here, and I'm gonna tell them just to vote for me, and maybe I can do it. So, if it was a true play system, that wouldn't work. But I think that I'm not sure I don't know if people intended it, but I do think the fact that you can win in a top three system, it does allow somebody to, you still might want to campaign citywide, but you can kind of identify, here are the places that are likely to support me. I'm going to go in these communities and really knock on doors and block walk. And the other part of town, I'm going to ignore it because they're going to vote against me, and I don't want to stir them up. So, but then that involves more analysis, and that's more cost in the sense if you really got to think about, where am I going to campaign, where am I not going to campaign, where am I going to put my resources. Whereas, like I said, in a district, it's a smaller unit, and maybe you're active in your district. Maybe you know your neighbors, and you get out there and do the old school. I was a knocking sound, knocking on doors and block walking. It's hard to block walk the whole city.
Okay, we have another from Tim Dowling. What do you think about ranked choice voting for city council?
So ranked choice, if I'm reading this right, and really that's the instant runoff system. So if you could put, I think that's what you're getting at. I would love it if we had ranked choice voting. But you need single member districts for that to really work. That's kind of or place system at large, and I wouldn't recommend place system at large. But the ranked choice, yeah, I think it's neat because it winds up being an instant runoff, and so. This recent election, we had several districts that had the runoffs in them, and we got the different election keep going out, and it's more work. But if you're not familiar with the ranked choice, the idea is when you get your ballot, you rank 1, 2, 3 your most preferred candidates, and so election day happens, the top vote getter nobody gets a majority. Okay, who came in last? Okay, they're eliminated. Who were their second choices? And let's reallocate their second choice. Oh, now we have a winner because this person's second choice, we add their votes to this person, and now they're a winner. Oh, still have a winner? Okay, let's eliminate this person and keep going. So I think I wish we did that. It's runoff elections. It's harder on the candidates. They got to get out there. Turnout can be very low in these elections, and gosh, for us now, they're coming up against a lot of December holidays, and people aren't thinking about politics. I mean, we are, right? We all like politics. That's why we're here. But a lot of folks aren't paying attention to politics at that point. So I'm all in favor of that. But you'd have to change state law. Well, you know what? I'm not a lawyer. Some of you are. But it's my understanding it is an attorney general opinion that our current election law doesn't allow ranked choice vote in instant runoffs. So I don't think a court has ruled on it, but I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me. Never take legal advice from me, y'all. Okay. So I'm all in favor of that. We need to do that.
I think you could be right too. At our convention last year, we had some discussions about ranked choice voting, and the league was in support of ranked choice voting. But I think we're showing our support because we need to change that law.
Mm-hmm.
You say they were not in favor, or they were, Julie?
We voted for it at the convention last year when we all.
Yeah. And you also mentioned, Julie, that ranked choice voting saves the city and the county money, probably by avoiding
I think that's
runoffs.
interesting. Yeah, because it costs money to run an election.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Right.
None of it's free.
And Tim Dowling had another question. Some folks might like the current system more because they can vote for 5 people instead of only 2. If we had single member districts and no at-large, your district member plus mayor, what is your thought about that? I heard this argument 2 days ago. Thank you for your great thoughts tonight. Much appreciated.
Well, yeah, I've heard people tell me that too, and thank you for that question. And my take on that is, yeah, you might have more representatives that way, but are you really getting more representation that way? I don't know. I don't think there's a right answer to that. I mean, you got to think, people in San Antonio, in Austin, they have single member district systems and a mayor at large, and they do that. So sometimes it's what we're used to. I think but I haven't given that much thought to, do people really value that? And I'm not sure of any evidence that I can point to or draw from to answer that. To me, it comes down to, again, when you all decide what kind of representation you want, what's going to get it, and it's liking voting for 3, getting the vote for 5 candidates leading to better representation. What's the goal here?
Okay, I see Linda Snyder is on screen and has raised her hand.
Okay.
I think if others will turn on their video, I might be able to get them on the panel. But I have a question before we move on to the next one. Can you explain, I know Houston has place voting for positions, and I left before I was really voting in Houston. What can you explain what that system is?
Well, I forget how many they have, but Houston, I think they might have like 5, but don't quote me on this. They might have, let's just say they have 5. I don't know. Let's say they have 5 at-large seats. See, for here in Corpus Christi, you don't run for any one particular seat. All the at-large candidates are on the same ballot. You get 3 votes. The top 3 vote getters win. In Houston, you don't do that. There's place 1, place 2, place 3, place 4, place 5. I think they actually use letters, and they don't use that. So maybe it's A, B, C, D. And if you want to run for an at-large seat, you say, I'm running for at-large place A, and I'm filing for it, and I'm a candidate for this particular at-large position. And other candidates who want that position also file for that particular position. So you're not running against all the at-large candidates, just the at-large candidates running in that particular place. And so the whole city votes anyway for this, and it's not top 3. In this case, you got to get a majority. I'm pretty sure in Houston it's a majority. And so you got to get a majority of the vote in that. So they could have runoffs for those. And so in ours, I mean, this is a criticism of ours. I've heard people say this, you can win an at-large seat by winning 14% of the vote. All right. So our system allows people who might not win a true citywide election to win an at-large seat in Corpus. That's why I think ours is a little better than the true place system, because in the place system like what Houston has, you've got to win a citywide election. You've got to get the most votes in a citywide election. For each one of these places, the candidates who run in those have to get the most votes. So that's how the place system, not the most votes, a majority of the votes. Sorry about that.
Okay, I have a question from Peggy, and then Linda, I'll get yours. Peggy Duran asks, a large problem we see is that large donors / businesses have more influence on our council members than individual concerns, like keeping the bay alive. How would you address this?
Well, if I had the answer to that, I'd probably have a big book and be a very successful author. That's a dilemma in politics that we've got all over the place. Now I would tell you, we need, maybe limits on donations. Okay. But every time laws are passed to try to put limits on donations, people find a way around them. And then the court rulings have declared donations freedom of expression. I think the only tool we've got is just disclosure, really disclosing who's making the donations, who's doing this, who's getting the favor. And, one thing also hurting us is, a lot of local media is not what it was 10, 15 years ago. So there's less reporting about what's going on with these big donors. But that's endemic to our system. I think the hope of any kind of public financing system in our state for candidates is almost zero. The idea behind that is when you run for office, let's say you got to meet a certain threshold of support, you qualify for public dollars to help you run for your campaign. And so that's something people have considered, public financing their candidates. So, you're running for city council, you don't have to go hustle around all this money, you get, public financing to help you pay for your campaign. But the chance of that, I can't imagine it would ever pass in our state. Sorry, I don't have a hopeful answer for you on that one. That really is a big issue facing our, national politics, local politics, every place, about the role that big money has and how our campaign finance laws are just so toothless or have been gutted where we can't do anything with them.
Okay, Linda, if you'll demute and lower your hand, your question.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm having trouble lowering the hand, but
That's all right. Don't worry about that. Go ahead.
okay, I think I got it. Okay. So, Dr. Huerta, my question is kind of a general one, and I just wanted to see your opinion about independent redistricting commissions and the likelihood in any time within the next, say, 10 years that you think that would actually happen here in Texas.
Well, for the state or for the city?
Either way. What do you think the
state.
odds are, and what's your opinion about it in general?
Well, I think for the state, it's you might as well put that. I mean, I hate to say things can never happen, but it's just it's not zero, but not much above zero. Local election, there's a better chance for that. They can be good. The trick is, how do you choose them, and what are their criteria, and what are their rules? So, when you do one, it has to be done well. And a poorly done redistricting commission, independent redistricting commission, can produce very poor results. All right. So there's a lot of politics, a lot of jockeying to get on these commissions, and if it's a bunch of hacks who get on there, they're going to produce lousy results. Now, I recall you all were advocating for that. My take on it as an outsider was the timeline just wasn't there to pull it off. But if you start working now, you can do that. And there's things, the public has a lot of avenues we have a lot more influence on local government than we do on state government, right? We have initiatives, we have, more access to our council members here. So, my take on it, and I think some of you cited Austin had one or something like that. I recall during the dialogue that was going on, but I think that that's something that, this group could lead and start pushing. What would it take to have an effective redistricting commission? What kind of timeline are we talking about? How do we select the folks for it? What are the criteria? What they need guidelines for how to draw the districts? I mean, so you could start all over if you wanted, right? You don't have to continue the existing lines. But yeah, I think communities that have used those, some states have them, right? And they can work really well. But some states didn't do a good job at it. And they're not seeing better results. I think Colorado's has been criticized about the composition of the committee. And I want to say Virginia's has been criticized too, because of the composition of these redistricting commissions. It's like they're trying to be very even in who they put on there. But sometimes one political community has the bigger part of the population, and they're not getting the same influence. So yeah, go for it on that. I hope it came through. I think they can. Independent redistricting commissions, when done well, are effective. When done well.
That is all of the questions, I believe, that we have at present. If you've got something to contribute or to ask, please do so now.
No, thank you, Linda, for that question. And of course, thank you, Dr. Huerta, for all the information and education you've given us. One thing we learned from the redistricting and the IRCs was that Austin, when they moved to all single member districts, is when they adopted the IRCs, and because they used that to create their single member districts, and that stayed in place since then. So it's something to think about. To me, that's a possible pro of moving to single member districts, is that you would have to draw the map, redraw maps.
Yeah. Well, one thing too, in politics, there's windows of opportunity that open up for making change. And it's unfortunate that, that might be too soft a word, that charter review commission, I remember that they did a lot of work, some real committed folks working on it. And I think, they had some really good ideas. I was looking forward to a dialogue with it. But then what happens? We have a pandemic, right? And that just, who's talking about charter review? But there's a political agenda and setting the political agenda. And so I think you all, as you mentioned advocacy as part of what you do, think about when is the time to push for a charter review, and what issues do we want, you want to advocate for on there, and how do you want to go about doing that? But think about who's on council, what's the political climate right now, is this the time to do it, is it not the time to do it? And you've got a starting point with the report that I think Toby Futrell was the one who chaired it. She came up with. There's some good information in there. There's a good starting point.
Yeah, it really was. Dr. Huerta, where did you get that information on the breakdown of the voters? That was really stimulating. That was, I was surprised, but not surprised by it, how it broke down the at-large races in these recent elections.
let me see. As a political scientist, I make sure to cite. So I'm going to share my screen again. Darn it, I'm all choking here on this thing. Let me go to it. So those were on the let me show you. It was on the and I can send it to one of you. It was on the county's election department page, and if you got really good eyes, oh good grief, this is an adventure. Yeah, it's amazing how
quick.
That was
really telling. It was pretty. And this year, for the first time, I had someone recommend that strategy of just voting for one. It took me aback because I just never think about, I think about how hard we fight for the vote, and then to not use the 2 votes. That's how I look at it. It's like, but I'm kind of giving away 2 votes. We work so hard. But you're also,
it's a unique thing about this system. And so, I can't get too involved in local politics and elections. So I stay out of it for the most part. But, when we did this research, that's one of the things we recognized right away. We wrote our article, vote once. Who's your favorite candidate? Just vote for them. Because if you vote for the other person, you're voting, in a sense, you're also voting against your favorite candidate. So it's just a little fluke.
That almost seems like an argument. Yeah, it seems like an argument against at-large voting, that it's not effective if you have to strategize how to vote like that. That's why I can't wrap my mind and heart around.
Well, I don't think I came out in favor of at-large voting. So, that right. I'm with you on that one. That's just it's an interesting, and I forget how we did it, but if you look, like there's in here, the website, that's the county's website. Now the 97 is the city secretary's webpage, because that was a city election. Yeah, this is microscopic. I'll send you the link that I had for that. But it's the county's one, and you can break it down by precinct. So you get the overall one, and you can get precinct results too. And so what you wind up seeing, and oh darn it, this one doesn't have it. Let me see if the other one has it. So darn. One of these, oh rats. Can you see it on this one? Total votes. We had to calculate it, but there was a way to show how it drops off. And like really, so here there were 36,000 votes for mayor, right? And if you multiply that by 3, that'd be like 100,000, right? Because you get 3 votes. But looking at large, it's way lower than that. It's 88,000. So I think even in 97, there were some people saying, "Oh, I'm just voting for so and so, and not for anybody else." I wish the other ones I had the mayor on there, but I don't think I have the mayor. I was doing a lot of cutting to make these things look smaller, because I know the perils of
well, I think you've taught us something we need to look at, though, to make decisions. Like, numbers don't lie, so it's a good thing to look at.
Well, you can misinterpret numbers, but when you interpret them correctly and factually and honestly, they don't. The facts are the facts, and that's what I tell my students all the time. We make evidence-informed decisions here. We might have a belief and think, "Oh, this is how I wish the world worked, and my ideology, my preferences, that this is how it is." But if the evidence goes against that, well, you got to say, "Well, I thought the world worked this way, but the evidence tells me it doesn't." So maybe I should go with the evidence instead of what I think the world is like. So evidence-informed decisions.
I think you've described our approach very well also. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Huerta. This has been very informative, and it gives us a lot of information. Some things we knew, some things we didn't know, and now you've given us an avenue to do some more research and be able to look at what our position statement is and see what changes, if any, need to be made in terms of what we feel is going to be most effective here in our elections, particularly our local elections. So this has been most helpful, I think, to all of us in hearing what you've had to say. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being with us. It has been a treat for us. Thank you so much.
And you all know how to reach me. So, but I will send the links of the sources. Again, many of you know how to get a hold of me. So I enjoyed it.
Outstanding.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Bye,
Well,
y'all.
thank you. Thank you. We are now going to have a very, very brief membership meeting, and we have just a few topics, and these are going to be very short and sweet, but just reminders mainly. First, I want to go with Julie and just do a little background and information about second Saturdays and lobby days coming up.
Great. Second Saturdays. All right. We had our first second Saturday meeting, and I apologize for the glitches. There were glitches, and if you experienced them, hopefully we will not have them the next second Saturday. One thing we tried to do is have the same call-in number connection for Zoom, and that changed this January. So there's a new Zoom connection, and you can find that on Club Express. So look for that. It'll be the one that we use from now until the end of the year. And that way you won't have to keep looking for it. We do have a next second Saturday scheduled for February the 11th. And we'll get you the right connecting information. And Alice Hawkins and Eli McKay are helping to coordinate it. What we want to do is look at the legislation that's being filed and our priority issues, but talk about it, use and analyze it using the DEI lens. So it should be quite a stimulating and enlightening conversation. The other thing is that Lobby Days is coming up, and that's February 27th through 28th. That they will be in Austin, Texas. We're going to have the training on Monday, February 27th, and we'll do our ledge visits on February 28th. Also on the February 27th is the State League's annual fundraising dinner, and it's called Women Power Texas, a Making Democracy Work dinner. The keynote speaker is Rochelle Garza. They always have honorees as well, and this year we'll be honoring Texas Gun Sense, Texas Impact, and Texas Tribune. So it should be a wonderful event. That is $100 for the tickets. You can find more information on the state website. But I highly recommend that we try to go. I think a lot of us are interested. You'll see in the recent voter, and we're always grateful for those. It says, if you're interested, contact our president, Catherine Oler. So I'm sure she's got a working list, and we're all going to try to figure out how we can get there together and advocate. And I think that's about it, other than if you've gotten your voter and start reading, we'll send out an email. We mentioned that we're going to have introduction to Observer Corps on February 4th. We're going to have to cancel that. I've had some family emergencies and some deaths in the family, and so I have to go to a service that day. So I won't be around. We'll just reschedule it. Y'all for understanding. I think that's about it, Catherine.
Great.
First, if I
Great.
can clarify something that you said, the dinner that is on Friday night is what cost $100. It does not cost anything other than your room, which will probably be shared to actually go to Lobby Days. I know I went, but I didn't go to the dinner at the time. I couldn't afford it, but I would love to go this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what cost $100.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that
Thank you.
information.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And it's also a big deal to get the information. So I think most of us at this meeting have already done it, but if you haven't, go to the state website and sign up for their newsletters and their action alerts, because that's where I get a lot of the information. They're already sending out some capital reports. We have a new advocacy chair this year. Her name is Elizabeth McNamara. She, like all our other officers, is going to do a great job. She was on the national board, and so now we have her here in Texas. Like, people want to come to Texas and from the national board and help us, which is awesome, because the reason I came here is one of my professors told me, if you want to change the world, you got to change Texas. So let's do it.
All right. Absolutely. Thanks, Julie, so much. Okay, moving right along, just want to let you know that we have a lot of individuals who want to do barefoot Mardi Gras again. And so that's coming up on February the 18th. It starts at 11 a.m. So if you would let us know if you're interested in participating in Barefoot Mardi Gras, we'll get more information out as it becomes available to us. I think we've already had some commitments on buying our beads. And we also have transportation arranged for that. So we will let you know as the information becomes available. More information becomes available. Next, March quickly. And Nell, can you give us an update?
Okay, I'm putting something in chat here. Okay, March for the vote. 2023 will be held on March 4th at Water's Edge Park, which is the park near downtown, not at North Beach, but the north end of the main Corpus Christi beach, across from the basketball court, where you see the basketball court. There will be Dr. Nancy Vera is going to MC for us again this year. There will be music. There will be a march. We'll have our banner there. And did I say the time is from 2 to 4? If you will go to the LWVCCA Club Express site, there is now a March 23 opportunity to volunteer. There is also in the top right-hand corner of the main home screen, there's a big red button that says donate. And we are really looking for donations to help us with our primary goal this year, which is to provide a $500 scholarship for one deserving high school senior. There are, it is open to it's an essay question. I know that we are working with the schools to get them to put it on Canvas, which if any of you have children in school, you'll know what that is. That's their general outreach program. There is also a counselor specifically in several schools that work with kids, seniors, to get from high school to college. I can't remember. I can never remember the title of that position. So that is how we are recruiting the seniors to send us their essay. And I think that's it. If you would like to also, you can just go to our website, like I said, and hit donate. That way you can either use PayPal or your credit card, or you can send your check to our P.O. Box, which is on all of our newsletters. And if you're not doing it, I really, really encourage you to read your newsletters. If nothing else, look through them. If you see a topic that interests you, you can follow up on it. But March is all over the January newsletter, and it will be all over the February newsletter. We have a Facebook page, and we have I think that's about it. We're on the calendar. We're on the Club Express calendar. So I think that's it, unless somebody has a question. Our management meeting, our planning meeting is tomorrow at noon. You're welcome to contact me, Annelle, at ebns.us. And if you would like a Zoom invitation to that, or go to the volunteer button and put your name in there. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Janelle. We appreciate the work that you and the committee is doing for this event. It was such a success last year, and we're looking forward to this year very, very much.
And it is a coalition. The process, the whole group
Yes.
is a coalition of different members, which I won't get into right now.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Now, as you know, we're at this is in May is the end of our league year. And so there's a lot of things going on. One of the most important things are our board elections. Sally, could you bring us up to date and what positions you're seeking candidates for?
Oh, thank you, diehards, for staying to hear the nominating committee's work. Well, I'm speaking to the membership here because the board's already been briefed, but why would you as a member be interested in this? Why is it important to you? Well, it's because next May, you, the membership, are going to be a part of the biggest thing that we do, and that's the annual meeting. It's a big deal. And among other things like the bylaws review, you'll be called upon to vote for a partial slate of new officers. And those offices have been publicized in our newsletter, and they will continue to be publicized in the newsletter. Now, this service cycle, we're going to vote on president and treasurer, social media, which is the Facebook and webpage administrator, membership vice president, and voter services vice president. Just real quick recap: president and treasurer, social media, membership vice president, and voter services vice president. But there could be, and I assure you there's going to be more. Okay, so far, we've had great responses from members like you who would consider serving on the board, but we're especially in need of more responses for treasurer. The list is dynamic because in the coming months, as events affect all of our personal lives, some offices may open up that we don't know about right now. The bottom line is, if you have an interest in, or if you're just curious about serving in any board position, especially the treasurer's position, would you please contact me or any member of the committee? Our names and our email addresses are in the newsletter. And we thank you for being league members and for considering services on the board. That's the end of my report.
Thank you so much, Sally. This is very, very important. And so I hope that you will heed Sally's request and get your information in if you're willing to serve. And please do consider seriously your willingness to serve. It really takes all of us to make this organization run. And so it's really important for you to engage. So I thank you for your time this evening. Thank you for participating in this meeting. And we look forward to seeing you. Let's see, many of you, we hope, on, what am I looking at? Drawing a blank. So looking at the next February, the
11th.
The 11th.
Saturday.
Second Saturdays, February the 18th. The next Saturday is Barefoot Mardi Gras. And then again, the LWV Texas Lobby Days, February 27th, 28th. We're going to have a very busy February. And then getting ready for March coming up in March. So thank you all. Have a good evening, and we will see you soon.
Oh, wait 1 minute. I'm so sorry. Before everyone goes, because we did mention redistricting, look at it at your newsletter. It will have an email in there from Stephanie Swanson, our issue chair for redistricting and voting rights. They are visiting redistricting again at the state legislative session. So it'll have more information. If you want to know more, we've got our Tim Dowling who will help you. I know he will. He's always a good help to me and some other folks who work on this issue. So reach out to us on that. You can also look again at the state website, and it'll have information about the redistricting. What they need more than anything is for you to know what's going on, and then they need testimony. So they're seeking people to do virtual testimony again. It is easy to sign up. Tim might want to say one thing about it before we go. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you, Julie. Yeah, it's real easy to sign up. There's links to how to do it. You basically just go to the Texas Senate website. Takes about 2 minutes to sign up. You can pick any day. I think they're the 26th, 27th, 28th of next week. And don't be deceived by one thing when you look at it. It'll say, today is Central Texas at 9 o'clock. And then 1 o'clock, we're doing East Texas. You can actually testify any day. So don't think that you're restricted to the South Texas time. That's just there to be the focus, but you can testify whatever day is convenient for you. The other way they want our participation is to submit written comments. So if you can't speak or you don't wish to speak, but you want to wish to have them hear from you, you could submit written comments, and that's easily done at the state's website as well. If you do want to testify, it's about a 3-minute process. It won't be more than 3 minutes. They will cut you off after that. So basically, it's up to you how much time you want to use, up to 3 minutes. And in the email that Stephanie has, there's some ideas there. If you want to bounce some ideas off me, happy to do that. And it's a very simple process, and it's not difficult at all. I've done it, gosh, I don't know, a dozen times or so. And there are other people on this call who've done it a lot too. So easy and important work. The league has a lawsuit pending in El Paso about this. And so it has some significance for that. That's basically it. But if you have any questions, let me know now or later.
Okay, thank you so much, Tim. Sally, you have another comment, question?
I'm not appearing in your gallery, and I apologize to folks if I didn't appear and all I presented them with was the audio. Were you able to see me?
No, just your
No.
just your image.
Well, I was never allowed to join as a panelist.
I did the invitation several times for several different people. Some were admitted and some were not, and I don't know why that is. I think we'll change the way that we approach meetings.
I just had an invitation to participate, but that came a little bit late. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that I wasn't up.
Yeah, if you accept that invitation to participate, then that will admit you as a panelist,
Well,
and then your screen will show.
I just now got it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, everybody.
That's okay.
Not a problem, not a problem. All right, we are about 2 minutes short of 7, but I think this has been given us a lot of food for thought. So I thank all of you for participating and being here, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. All right,
Okay.
well done.